Afternoon, Chair. Your meeting is now live.
Good afternoon. I am Councillor Liam Madden, Chair of the Governance and Audit and Standards Committee. I'd like to welcome you to this virtual meeting that has been broadcast to enable the press and the public to view it. We are meeting virtually in response to the limitations placed on governance by the COVID-19 pandemic. The City Solicitors advise that in accordance with Section 78 of the Coronavirus Act 2020, this meeting will be run by reference to the model standing orders as set out in the local authorities brackets coronavirus, close the brackets, flexibility of local authority meetings, close the brackets, regulations 2020 number 392. Can members and officers turn their microphones off when not speaking to avoid potential feedback? I will now ask each member of the committee to introduce themselves. So I'll call them. Could I call Councillor Bosher?
Councillor Simon Bosher, present, Chairman.
Thank you. Could I call Councillor Smythe?
Councillor Smythe, present.
Thank you. And Councillor Ferret?
Councillor John Ferret, present.
Thank you. I think we, as far as I can see, Councillor Young and Councillor Wood are not here. Is that correct? Okay. Can I then ask for the external auditors to introduce themselves? Can I have Helen Thompson?
Hello, it's Helen Thompson from Ernst & Young.
David White?
Hello, David White, Audit Manager from Ernst & Young.
Thank you. And can I ask the council officers to introduce themselves who are here? Peter Bolf, our City Solicitor.
Hello, everybody. It's Peter Bolf here. Hi.
Could I ask Paul Somerset? Paul's standing in for Lizzie Goodwin, who's been called away. Paul would like some items moved up the agenda, which I think we'll agree to. But Paul, could you introduce yourself?
Hello, Paul Somerset, Deputy Chief Internal Auditor for Portsmouth City Council.
Thank you. Michael Lloyd from Finance.
Hello, Michael Lloyd, Finance Manager for Technical and Financial Planning.
Thank you. Julian Pike.
Good afternoon, it's Julian Pike, Deputy Director of Finance.
And Vicky Plightus from Democratic Services.
Vicky Plightus, Democratic Services, present, Chair.
Peter Smith-Parker, who's recording this for us.
Peter Smith-Parker, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. Apologies for absence. We haven't got any officially, so we have two members missing, but we'll see how it goes. If they come this any time during the afternoon, I'll ask them if they have any declarations of interest. But I ask the members who are present if they have any declarations of interest. No, I don't see any hands. Okay, thank you. The minutes of the meeting are held on the 20th of November. Are members happy with these as a correct record? Okay, I don't see any dissent. So can we do item 3 then? We'll do the minutes. I'll do them accuracy and matters arising at the same time, if that's all right, members. I'll do big page 5. Is that easier for people, or page 1? What's easier? Big number 5?
Big number 5 is fine now, I know.
Okay, thank you. So big number 5, page 5. Big number 6. The only thing I had arising from that, Vicky, was item 44, the audit results report. An explanation would be published on the PCC's website because of the delay. I don't know if that's happened. And members asked for sight of the proposed wording for the explanation before it was published. That was agreed, but I don't know if that's happened either.
Yes, Chair. I circulated an email to all members of the Governance Audit and Standards on the 23rd of November, which contained the wording, which was then subsequently published on the Council's website.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Julian. Thank you. Anything on page 6, members? Anything on page 7? I think of 47.2, I think the statement of accounts have now gone. I signed them off on the 11th of January, earlier this week, but I think they actually were signed off by the leader and the chief exec on the 14th. Is that correct, Julian, if I remember? Yeah. Okay. Anything on page?
Sorry, Chair. I was trying to take my microphone.
All right.
off.
No, I thought you were going to make a cup of coffee. Yeah. Anyway, they're signed off and they're gone.
The accounts have just been signed off today, in actual fact.
Oh, today. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on page 7, members? Page 8? Page 9? Page 10? Page 11?
Page
Chair,
8.
I think
Yeah,
Councillor
page
Smythe
10.
wants.
Sorry, yeah.
Sorry,
Sorry.
page
I'm,
8.
I'm like you, I'm looking at lots of things at the same time.
Okay,
Councillor
page 8.
Smythe, please, yeah?
I would quite like some more feedback of how that debate went. You remember I made some, I had some doubts about it, and I had a note to raise it today. Perhaps Sophie could give me a ring and we could just have a little further chat about it. I don't want to do anything major now, but I did have a few queries about it.
Is this item 52, Judith, yeah?
This is item 49.
49, oh, yeah. Oh, yes, sorry, the shareholder thing, yeah. I don't know who's dealing with that, actually.
Sophie Mallon.
Well, Sophie's done it.
It was at the last meeting, yeah. Peter, could you?
I was going to say Sophie prepared the report with me last year, and I had a bit of a go with Gerald at the beginning of the year about it. And by all means, Judith, I'll get Sophie to give you a ring about it.
Perhaps she could send me the latest version so we could have a substantive conversation. I don't expect it to be really difficult, but I would like just to be further reassured by it.
It's not changed since you last looked at it,
Okay.
Councillor, but I will ask her to send you a comment, yeah?
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
That's
thank you. Thank you. So I'll go back page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, and page 13. Is it okay, members? Can we agree those as a true record? Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't think these items will take too long, but Paul Somerset's been helicoptered in because Lizzie couldn't come and has asked, could we take the items off the agenda? And I think we should. So that'll be items 5 and 6. Is that okay, members? So item 5 is Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000, known as RIPA, and Investigatory Powers Act 2016. Paul, is there anything you need to add to this?
Thank you, Chair. No, nothing really to add. It's just a short report to say that we haven't used our RIPA powers in that period noted in the report. And it's also just to update you on the inspection that we had carried out by IPCO, that they were happy that we implemented the 3 recommendations they made back in 2016, but happy to take any questions.
Any questions, members? No, good. I don't mean good, but can we agree the recommendations then? Noting that there haven't been any RIPA applications and note the inspection. Okay, thank you, members. Thank you. Item 6 is whistleblowing. So this is the whistleblowing annual report and policy. Again, Paul, anything to add?
Nothing really to add, Chair. The policy has been reviewed, but we haven't made any changes. But it's just to let you know that we do obviously review it to make sure that we update anything that is needed. And as you'll see in Appendix A, we've only had 1 instance of whistleblowing come to us, and that's the kind of limited detail that we can give. But again, happy to take any questions.
Yeah. Okay, any questions, members? Oh, Judith, please. Councillor Smythe.
Is that number, I don't know if it says so in the report, I can't see it. Is it, that number is it exceptionally high or exceptionally low? The number of whistleblowing actions we've been asked to take? Only 1, you say? No, it doesn't say. Is it normal just to have 1, or is that very much under normally?
It's very difficult to say because obviously you're not aware what people are telling you or not telling you. I wouldn't say it's anything to cause an alarm. Sometimes we have a couple more, but we're never looking double figures really. We'd be worried if we were getting double figures. So I think in the last few years, it's always been very low numbers.
That's extremely helpful. Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to know. I think sometimes we're going to find that there are some very aberrant results because of COVID and other things. This would have been for a longer period, but thank you for that. That's
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, members? No. Can we note the recommendations then 2.1 and 2.2? Is that agreed? Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you. Can we go back on the agenda now? We'll go back to the external audit report, which starts on page something around that, page 15 of ours. And could I ask, well, I don't know who's going to do it. I'll leave it to David or whoever.
Thank you, Chairman. It will be a bit of a combination of the two of us.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Helen. Thank you, Helen.
So just in terms of introducing the report, we've completed all of the outstanding work that is mentioned in the report and issued the audit opinion as already confirmed earlier in the meeting. The audit opinion is unqualified, but it does include an emphasis of matter in relation to the disclosure of the valuation uncertainty in relation to property, plant and equipment and investment property valuations. So that's disclosures included within the accounts linked to COVID-19. On the basis that we are assuming members will have read the report, which has been updated since you previously saw it in November, I'm just going to ask David to focus on the key areas of audit focus and the work completed, which is set out on page 22 of the agenda pack. So David, I'm going to ask if you could maybe come on and just work through that.
Thanks, Helen. Yes, so just to talk through the areas of risk and focus as they're summarised on page 22, there is then further detail in the report on each of those. The first two risks are the risks of fraud assumed under the ISAs. We've undertaken the programme of work that's set out in our audit plan around those two risks, which is primarily around testing additions to property, plant and equipment, REFCAS expenditure, journal entries and the other procedures that are required to address fraud risks under the ISAs. And we have no matters to report to you in respect of either of those risks. The first of the significant risks then was around the valuation of Lakeside North Harbour. We undertaken work to review that valuation as at the 31st of March 2020 by using our internal valuation specialists. There were 10 elements to that asset which needed to be reviewed, and there are no matters to report to you as a result of that work. We identified an increased risk around the valuation of land and buildings valued with reference to market factors or existing use value property and investment property as a result of COVID-19. And so again, we undertook an extended programme of work there with larger than normal sample sizes, tested in total 30 investment properties and 16 items of property, plant and equipment, reviewing all the significant inputs and assumptions which feed into those valuations at the balance sheet date. That was partially undertaken by our internal specialists and partially by the local audit team. There are then other aspects to the overall review of valuations, including looking at assets that are not revalued in the year to make sure that they're materially correct, and looking at the related accounting entries. Again, there are no matters to report to you as a result of that work. There was an increased focus around going concern and the appropriateness of disclosures within the accounts around the use of the going concern principle, again arising from the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on local government finances. We worked with the council challenging some of the initial wording and the assumptions and cash flows sitting behind the council's going concern assessment and agreed a form of words that now appears in the final version of the financial statements. There is nothing to emphasise in our audit opinion with regard to going concern. The skipping on one, pension liability valuations. We undertook the work set out in our audit plan, which included gaining assurances from the auditor of Hampshire Pension Fund around the source data used by the actuary in making the pension liability estimate, and looking at the work of the actuary in totality. That work gave rise to one unadjusted audit difference that is set out later in the report. That has been appropriately covered by the letter of representation and is not material, so it does not affect the audit opinion. We then undertook work to cover off the other 4 areas of focus that are set out there, so PFI accounting, the minimum revenue provision, the restatement of the prior year comparators in the council's comprehensive income and expenditure statement, and expenditure funding analysis and some of the related disclosures as a result of changes to the council's reporting structure in 1920, and the group accounts assessment. And we have no matters to report in respect of those areas of focus. The other thing to mention is one page further on, page 23, our value for money assessment, again related to the purchase of Lakeside. We undertook the work there to assess the arrangements underpinning the decision-making process around the purchase of Lakeside. And again, there's further details set out later in the report, but we have no matters to report to you, nothing there which is impacting our overall value for money conclusion.
Thank you, David. Chairman, happy to take any questions or comments that members may have on the remainder of the report.
Hello? Hello. Could I just pick up one point? You mentioned there, but it's mentioned later in the report, you're right, and that's the pension, the situation related to the pension. And there's the way I read it, I may be wrong, is there's a 7.7 million gap. Is that, am I reading it rightly?
Sorry.
I was just going to say, for a starting point, it's not a gap, but I'll let David explain because he will be able to give you a slightly more comprehensive answer.
Well, and the other question following from that, in which you can answer, should we be worried about it, whatever the setup is?
No. In summary, I would say no. Julian or Michael might want to come in on this as well, but it's really, the pension liability is a complex estimate, which the actuary makes at a point in time. We're required by the auditing standards to compare the actuary's estimate with actual information available at the time of the audit where possible. And in this instance, comparing the actuary's estimate of the council's share of the assets of Hampshire Pension Fund with the sort of notional actual amount that would have been in the pension fund's balance sheet, that's what's given rise to that difference. But it's not indicative of a sort of a shortfall in the council's obligations or, you know, anything that you would need to be of significant concern.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor John Ferret. John? Yeah, I've got you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to focus on under the areas of focus, and particularly the valuation of land and buildings. You know, by necessity, this is a sort of looking back process to year ending March 2020, almost a completely different world, and a lot has happened, to put it mildly, since then. And clearly you go into detail there, David and Helen, about, you know, the impact of COVID, the impact that could have, falling rental income. I just wondered when, because obviously the council is also operating in real time, when could we expect to, you know, start to understand what impact that has had in terms of valuations of property and the investment portfolio?
So, Councillor Ferrer, if we're talking specifically about the investment portfolio rather than the operational property, plant and equipment, I think the work that we have done was obviously at a point in time, the 31st of March 2020, as you said, at which point the impact of the coronavirus was relatively limited for that financial year. In terms of our assessment of the impact of that for the current financial year to the 31st of March 2021, obviously that will form part of our audit for the current year. It might be better for perhaps either Julian or Michael to say what monitoring has been done by officers, because I know that has been a focus of the work that was done by them in terms of keeping on track of particularly income coming in and any impacts from that. We've taken that into account to a limited extent, or to the extent that we are required for as part of our going concern assessment. But in terms of the actual valuation of the properties, that will be a year-end position for us. So I don't know if either Julian or Michael would want to comment on that.
I'm sure Michael will be better come in with maybe with a bit more detail than I'll be able to give. But the feedback I've had from the valuers so far is that the market has held up relatively well, and we have actually managed to lease out space at Lakeside during the pandemic, and income streams have held up remarkably well. But it will be some time before before the valuers would be able to assess any long-term impact on the effects of valuations as the COVID pandemic actually unwinds.
Do you want anything to add, Michael?
No, I think Julian's given a pretty good summary. I mean, in essence, the problem is that we simply don't fully know what changes COVID will have brought about, because we're not yet in the sort of new post-COVID normal.
Okay, thank you, Michael. John, do you want any follow-up?
No. It's you know, I can understand that. It's like everything is on hold at the moment. It's interesting how the values and valuations seem to be in the same place as well. I mean, we can all anticipate what changes are likely to be, but yeah, it's interesting living in this this sort of era when everything seems to be on hold.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you, Councillor Tudor Smythe.
I was going to raise almost the same question as Councillor Ferret, so I think we've had answers. Thank you. I mean, it is worrying, and I suppose just to add to that, is there anything you would advise us as a council to do in order not just to wait complacently for a year to discover about that, or is it something that scrutiny should look at, or what would you be advising if you were in our shoes, Helen?
So I think in our view, you are doing what you should be doing. So you haven't ignored it completely and sort of stuck your head in the sand to say, let's see what happens. I think there has been close monitoring of the impact of COVID on both expenditure and income streams at the council, and that came through very clearly in terms of the work that we were doing around the going concern assessment. And one thing that I would say in relation.
Sorry.
That's okay. One thing I would say, and we all have those problems, one thing I would say for the council is that you had actually done a good going concern assessment and provided disclosures in the draft financial statements. A number of other councils basically waited until we asked them to do it before doing it. So I think actually you are doing the right things, and it will be very much a case of, I think, keeping close to this area as you go through this sort of third period of lockdown, and as we hopefully start to come out of this pandemic, in terms of looking at what will the new normal look like. So nothing I can really add at this point, but it is something that we are going to obviously going to come back to as part of our 2021 audit.
Okay,
thank you, Chair.
Thank you. David, Helen?
I would just like, nothing that I'd like to add, but I would just like to express our thanks to the finance team, all members of the finance team and the officers that have supported us during the audit. It has been a challenging year for everybody in many different ways. We have done significantly more audit work this year than in previous years in certain aspects of the audit, and I think it's a very creditable audit results report that you have received.
Okay. I would just second that. Okay. Yeah, just to say thank you very much.
David, I closed my eyes there. I thought it was an airplane. You sounded the pilot. Yeah, honestly, it's like, anyway, can I ask some questions on the report itself then?
Sure.
Okay, because you finished your introduction.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay. I was just fairly minor points, but are you using our page numbers or your page numbers?
We can use your page numbers. So the large page.
36. When we're talking about the group accounts assessment, and it says we are satisfied the group accounts are not required for 1920. This is an area which will need to be kept under review going forward. What do you mean by that? Are we waiting something from government, or?
It just means that the group accounts assessment, is informed by a consideration of how material or otherwise the transactions and balances within subsidiary companies would be to the council's financial statements as a whole if they were to be consolidated into those as a sort of group accounts. So it just means we have to keep under review whether there are significant changes to the size and scale of the council subsidiaries that would mean that that assessment would change in a future year.
Okay, thank you. Helen, on your letter, which I think is a draft, yes it is. It is just, and there are various procedures we go through, but the I think it's the third last paragraph says, until we have completed these procedures, we are unable to certify that we've completed the audit of the accounts in accordance with the requirements, bum, bum, bum. Are these, will that still be in the final letter?
No, so we will take those sentences out to be clear that when we, so there is an element of work that remains outstanding. That's the whole of government accounts that's referenced within the audit results reports. That's because the work has to be done once the audit work is completed. It's been complicated as well by problems with HM Treasury's systems. So we will update the audit results report to reflect that all work has been completed as part of that submission process.
Okay, thank you. It's page 58, and it's the very last paragraph or the very last sentence of summary of key changes. Our current understanding is that the requirement to follow UK independence rules is limited to the component firm issuing the audit report and not to its network. This is subject to clarification with the FOC. When will we expect clarification on that? Do you know?
Sorry, I'm just.
Yeah, page 50. Our page 50.
No, I found the right paragraph now. Sorry, apologies.
Yeah.
It's not something that is ever likely to impact Portsmouth City Council, in all fairness. I suspect the clarification is still to come through. I'm not aware that we've had that, but the new independent standard is now operational, and I suspect as that beds in, there will be further changes. But in this for that particular instance, I don't think it's anything that's ever going to affect Portsmouth.
Okay, could you? I think I've brought this one up before, but it's probably the conspiracy theorist in me. Page 66, and we're talking about which is Appendix C and related circumstances. What is reported? Non-disclosure by management. And I think I might have asked this before. How would you know? No, I mean, is it a historical thing if it does happen? I expect it doesn't happen that often, but it's got to be on the paper. I accept that. But is something you find out years later?
So this is in relation to related parties. So there's a specific note in relation to related parties. Generally, how you find out is it might be through a whistleblower. It might be through just some very diligent auditor who's gone into a lot of detail. I would say I have never been in a position where we have had management fail to disclose a related party deliberately. We've identified errors, but we've never had anything deliberate.
Okay, well, I accept that. Those are the points that I find arising from the report. Thank you for that. Members, any questions from any other part of the report? No? Well, David and Helen, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman.
And we have one item left. I know you like to stay for it. Cheers, and thank you. Is that okay, members? So we've got to note that report.
Yeah, agreed.
It was information only, really. The last item we have on this agenda is item 7, I think. 7.
It is.
Yeah. And the city solicitor will deal this. Peter Bock. Peter, anything to add to the report?
Not really. What I would say, Councillor Madden, is November to August we had 11. From August to date we are probably averaging about the same. So the good news is that the range of complaints doesn't all emanate from social media. It emanates from what you may or may not describe and or recognise as good old-fashioned behaviours qua members of the public and member on member. So that's sort of reassuring that the sort of social media mania of the previous year seems to have calmed down. The elements that I've indicated were dealt with have been dealt with in the sense of the very limited admonishment of members, if at all, having found that they engaged the local assessment criteria, have been dealt with. The other good news is the new independent persons as interviewed seem to have been exposed to all relevant members now, and I think they're coming on pretty well, as are the deputies dealing with the IFPs, which I'm exposing Paul, Helen and Sophie to. In absence of any of the members relevant to the IFP saying to the contrary, it's more or less steady as it goes, really. So I'm quite happy with it. It's not untoward from the previous years I've looked at this report, and I don't feel that there is a great theme of difficulty coming through that isn't dealt with above and beyond the usual chestnut, which is the ultimate sanctions down the line if we had to do anything, are pretty toothless. But that is, as we all know, a central government issue. I'm happy to take any questions, members and colleagues. Thank you. Councillor Madden, you're on mute.
Yeah, Peter, I just want to say we were expecting something from government probably a year ago, I think, but of course, COVID's come into it. Yeah, I have to agree with you, and that's the point I was going to make. We are absolutely toothless. We have public making complaints, that's mainly what, against members, and at the end of the day, there's not very much we can do, even though we sit as a filtering panel or indeed as the complaints panel, listen to what's been said. I just want to raise some questions on this. So we say to the member who's under complaint, write an apology, do a bit of training, do this and do that, yeah. But we don't follow it up. Is that correct, Peter? We don't know if they've done it or not.
Above and beyond that very low level of recommendation, which is usually there to prevent the matter going to a committee for further reconsideration, we don't do anything beyond actually me being told it's done. Yeah. So if one of the deputies says they've had a chat, I take it on face value. If a member, for example, has been signposted to the local government for training purposes, above and beyond actually producing it to them, there is no additional sanction beyond me asking them to do it. Yeah. What I would like to put in context, though, Councillor Madden, is this. All the 11 complaints we had last year have gone to an IFP and been dealt with at a pretty low level. They've not escalated to a committee, nor have they been to a review from a disgruntled complainant, whilst I have had quite a lot of personal flack relevant to 2 particular complaints. You can obviously tell which ones they are because they had 37 members of the public complaining, and we had a number from a particular incident at full council. Apart from that, it's pretty low level stuff in the sense that at the IFP it tends to get knocked out by yourselves and the independent persons pretty easily. So we're not dealing with the world's worst behaviour, if I could put it in context.
Yeah,
I see Councillor Bosham might laugh and disagree.
I'll call the other people in a minute. I just want to make this point.
That's a red rag to a bull, Peter.
Is there anything? No, but so members of the public made 37 complaints against the conduct of a particular member. Yeah. I've only actually sat on one filtering panel this year. So, I mean, all the members clearly have been involved, and I think some of the standing deputies have been involved, which is great. But can we not, once a panel has made a decision, whether it's a filtering panel or the complaints panel, is there nothing we can do to follow it up in the sense of saying the panel has decided, whichever it is you should do equalities training or whatever? Can we not say, and we want to hear back from you within whatever, and then have it reported back to us so that we may want to put a complaint in? I mean, I don't know, Peter, because it's so insipid, the whole lot.
Theoretically, what you could do is say to me, dear monitoring officer, can you prove the position? All right. Now, if I can't, the inference is, or the actual evidence is, that the member has not engaged in the recommendation of the panel, at which point a complaint could be put again on the basis of bringing the council to dispute because you're ignoring process. And then you end up in this sort of world of sanction and cross-sanction. Now, I'll probably accept that's a sensible thing to do if, for example, we weren't dealing with fairly low-level stuff. And what you have to remember is some of the recommendations for chats with the Deputy Monitoring Officer or call to me or recommendation for training are to prevent the matter going to a further review by a committee, at which point you as members own the same decision and would say to me, what would your recommendation be in a range of responses? At which point you may or may not, as members, because it's your decision then, not mine as monitoring officer, say actually training and or an apology is what you want to do. The trouble with it is you've had to do a full committee and review everything over process and deal with an investigation. So it is a little bit watery at the IFP level. Because, you know, if you just knock them out without sanction, these people are asking for it to be reviewed by a committee. The good news is they're not. That's not necessarily saying that's a right thing. It might be a view that members take in a contrary sense.
Thank you. Councillor John Ferret, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chair. I'd just like, firstly, to agree with Peter on the independent persons, or the newly independent persons that we have as part of the panel process. I think they, certainly those that I've sat with, have been very good, have got to grips fairly quickly with what happens at Portsmouth City Council and amongst Portsmouth City councillors. And I also agree with Peter's perspective in terms of, you know, putting these complaints into context. I think the outcomes invariably show, you know, the level that these complaints are at and what people are complaining about. I've sat on, I don't know, I've sat on quite a few as a result of being an independent councillor. So in order to provide presumably balance on the panels, then I've sat on quite a few of the panels. And I think Peter will know that I've become increasingly irritated, frustrated that many of these complaints are just an extension of the culture war that is raging out there, that is going on social media. You can spot many of them a mile off in terms of the political motivations that are behind them. And I think panels have come to very sensible conclusions when complaints have come in and they're being made on that basis. I'm particularly irritated by complaints that you get from councillors against fellow councillors. I think I can only see one there amongst that list, and I strongly suspect that is one that was made against me. I think I've been complained about by Labour councillor, UKIP councillor, and a Lib Dem councillor. So I only need a Tory councillor for a full house. I'm not inviting Councillor Bosher to put one in, but should he do so, then I have got a full house of complaints. But, you know, I think certainly councillors should be avoiding using this unless it is something of sufficient seriousness. But when it's about political difficulties or it's someone trying to get even as such, then, you know, that is really an abusive process as far as I'm concerned. But, you know, whilst I am, you know, many of these are time wasting and, you know, the public have a right, councillors have a right to put in complaints, but I think the panel have done, or the panels have done a good job in terms of keeping these in perspective. The independent persons have done a good job in terms of their observations. And I'd like to thank Peter as well, because I think Peter has been a voice of reason on most of the panels that I've sat on.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, John, and particularly the panel I sat on this year. But it's just, if particularly when the public make a complaint, they want to see if any action's been taken and followed up, and that's all I'm concerned about. Once somebody decides that whatever panel it is, that somebody has to do something, you know, I'm just seeking advice from Peter so we can follow that up. or it should be followed up at some stage.
The interesting thing is, Councillor Madden, once they get over the initial abuse of shouting at me through email, and I park them in the process, I rarely get a response to my decision, apart from obviously the occasional member will say, "How did you get to that conclusion, Pete? It's complete bonkers." But that's because it's us rather than members. I rarely, if ever, have had a member of the public come back and say, "Go away, I don't agree with you," etc. You know, they don't seem to be as engaged once they realise the process has gone through and the members have been there, the independent persons there, and you've explained the nature of the local assessment criteria, which are quite restrictive. If you're not in, you're not in, and that knocks out quite a few of them. Followed by the balance of speech as against free speech in terms of social media, followed by we're not going to get really engaged in doing something because you think we ought to. And that filters out an awful lot, hence the term filter panel. So, you know, I rarely, if ever, have been approached post, even with some of the quite important ones, like, for example, Black Lives Matters, even, for example, important ones like the last but one full council when we talked about the issue of transgender. I would expect a lot of stick from the complainants having knocked those two out. Not one. Not one of the 37 came back to me and said, "You're bonkers." Albeit a couple of members may have told me in the corridor that I was bonkers on a couple of these occasions, but members of the public not.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Councillor Judith Smythe.
I've got a couple of observations. One is, I know this is a small one, but it's quite important. Under the complaint number 7, you used a gendered pronoun, which can help to identify people. That shouldn't have happened, I don't think. Small.
Yeah. Who's that?
Bullet point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely.
I just think it's bad to do that. Don't do it again. And the next thing is, I do think it would be useful to have a 5th column on this report, just one a tick or a cross, appropriate follow-up done, or training completed or whatever, action taken, just so that we know that the panel's not just talking shop. Because I do think it's important that if we met a member of the public who'd complain, we could say, "I'm sure that the right things were done."
I think that's a fair comment. And the other thing is, it might give me a little bit of armoury if I said to the recalcitrant member, "Look, if it goes on to the report and it's not actioned, you may get a further member complaint on the back of it."
Exactly.
Which is essentially sticking 2 fingers up to the membership plus me, and that will move on to something else.
Also, it adds to the deterrent of this.
Yeah.
And I think if I was, complained about and had somebody saying I ought to do the training, I would feel quite seriously about doing it, and I'd expect to be told to do it.
Yes. And, I can tell them, but
But if we have a system which anybody could put up 2 fingers to at all stages, it's not worth having a system at all.
Well, that is true, Kazimai, but, what I would say is that, this is not a high volume of work. Bear in mind, I've no sanctions, and the behaviour is pretty consistent and pretty good.
Yeah, it is. I don't take away from that at all. It's just that should we have an escalation or more difficulties, and yet people think, "Oh, well, it doesn't matter," then I think we're in deep. But I agree. I'm impressed that there are relatively so few, actually. It's great. Thank you for this work.
Okay. Councillor Simon Bishop, please.
Thanks, Chairman. I think Councillor Smith should count herself lucky that she wasn't a member of the authority when we were also responsible for Southsea Town Council. I think we used to get involved in the code of conduct complaints. Yeah, you're smiling there, Chairman, and I agree with you, because 11 in a year is great. It was probably 11 a month when we were looking after Southsea Town Council or whatever. It was a complete nightmare. I'd sort of generally agree with the comments that have been made by John, in so much that I've had some experience with the independent members, and I think they are excellent. They have picked it up very quickly. They're certainly very diligent in the way they go about it, and they get it, for want of a better expression, because certainly some of this is driven by different political points of view in some instances, and members of the public not getting perhaps what they wanted, so they're going to slap in a complaint. I mean, I had a complaint made about me by one of my residents who put in a planning application. The next door neighbour effectively objected to it and wanted me to do a site visit. And because I did a site visit to the next door neighbour and I was pictured in her back garden looking at what the proposal was, the applicant decided to put a complaint in against me, alleging that I was corrupt because I was going to the next door neighbour. But that was clearly driven by the fact that I had a sympathetic view with the objection to the planning application, or that's what they were looking to do, which wasn't necessarily true anyway. So I think a lot of this, and I think the initial filtering panels are very good at actually digging into the nature of some of the complaints, and in quite a lot of instances that I've seen, is because the councillor either disagreed with the complainant on a particular issue or couldn't assist them for whatever particular reason. But certainly the low numbers that we've actually got, I think is indicative of the fact that, council chamber aside, I think as councillors we generally work well together for the betterment of Portsmouth, in all honesty. And I think the council chamber is exactly that. Usually 8 hours of my life I'm not going to get back, but it serves its purpose, I guess. But certainly I welcome the report, and I would like to see that perhaps we put our thanks on record to the independent members that actually sit on these panels, because I think they do an extremely professional and extremely good job at what they actually do.
Yeah, that's fair, Councillor Bowser.
Okay, thanks, Simon. I was slightly ahead of there. I suggest recommendation 2.3, and just to follow on the wording, the previous one, or the ones above, it is recommended that the independent members be thanked for their work. Something like that, Simon?
Yeah, that'll be fine. Just put something on record, because they are sort of, with respect, the invisible people that keep this particular machine working.
Happy to do that, Councillor Bowser.
Okay, Ned, any other comments, members? Any other questions? No, thank you. Well, there are 3 recommendations there. Then we note the report. We talk about anything we'd like to see changed, and recommending that the independent members be thanked. Oh, sorry, Judith. Judith,
are we going to add in the point about putting an extra column down the side or not? Because we ought to resolve that if the case.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with you doing that.
Well, I think that's a fair point, and this is sort of the thing I was saying earlier on. But what happens then? Do we need to put something on in a report somewhere, Peter, or a procedural bit if the member refuses to answer? Says Peter that that's what the panel said you should do. We can arrange, or you arrange, or whatever the procedure then be, and the member doesn't do it or doesn't report back. Would we then need to put something on each? Yeah.
I can do is put in a 1, 2, 3, 4, a 5th column, and I can put in parentheses below it, failure to engage with regard to recommendation within a timely manner could expose yourself to re-investigation under a separate complaint. Now, I don't have to amend the complaints process or indeed standing orders or anything on the basis that you would just complain. And frankly, any of the relevant scrutiny members could pick it up on a year basis and say, hang on, you've had 6 months to do it, why haven't you done it? At which point a complaint comes in, and it's very difficult for anybody to justify a position that isn't investigatable, really. So I'm happy to do that in that sort of way.
Okay, is that all right, members? Yeah, we'll put that in, yeah. My hackles got up a bit. 5th columnist, of course, emanates from the Spanish Civil War.
It is.
Don't mention the Inquisition.
It's a column that just demonstrates that we want the action to be followed, that's all.
Yes.
Okay, members, we've agreed those recommendations. That concludes the meeting. Thank you very much. And we have another meeting sometime in March. I haven't got the date in front of me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. You held on to the connection all the way.
Cheers, Leah.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Thank you, everybody.
Cheers.